My name is Katya. I'm the Managing Director of the Mayor's Innovation Project. We're a national peer learning network for U.S. mayors. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. The land where I live and work is the ancestral home of the Ho-Chunk Nation. At the Mayor's Innovation Project, we focus our programming on particularly on small to mid-sized U.S. cities, and our goal is to support mayors in learning about and replicating best practice city policy on a range of issues, from equitable economic development to climate resilience and voting integrity. If you're a mayor or city interested in advancing innovative public policy, I encourage you to join us. I'll drop a link for our website in the chat in just a moment here. Today, in partnership with 10 fantastic organizations, I'm so glad to be introducing the third of 4 of our virtual workshops designed to share ideas about leveraging federal funds to replicate successful models for lead remediation. 2 weeks ago, panelists explored how cities can target investments to accelerate and target lead service line replacement. Today's conversation will focus on city programs that have combined energy assessment with lead and mold identification. And the final workshop in this series on December 8th will build on today's discussion, focusing on the dangers posed in the lead service line replacement process and strategies to prevent hazardous exposure for workers and residents. You can find recordings of previous sessions, register for the final session, and the future home of today's recording at the link that I will drop in the chat again in just a moment. If you're interested in this work, I encourage you to submit a proposal to Healthy Babies, Bright Futures for a $15,000 planning grant related to equitable lead mitigation projects. Proposals are due November 18th, and again, I'll drop this in the chat in just a second. Some quick logistics, although you probably all know the drill on Zoom by now. Please type your questions into the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll post that complete recording to the website landing page next week. So now, without further ado, it's my honor to introduce today's moderator, Julia Hustwit. Julia is a national expert on climate change, the built environment, and disadvantaged communities, who has spearheaded federal policy initiatives and directed multi-billion-dollar programs to promote sustainability, resilience, health, and equity in affordable housing in low-income areas. She contributed to President Obama's Climate Action Plan, served as a senior leader at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and Department of Energy, and advised the transition teams of President Biden and New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Welcome, Julia, and I'll turn the conversation over to you.
Thank you so much, Katya, and thank you everyone who's attending today, especially our panelists who are taking time out to talk to us about this really important topic. I will try to foster a good conversation here. Please, if you have questions as we go along, put them in the chat and we'll see how we can weave them in, but we'll definitely get to questions at the very end, if not while we go. So let me start by introducing our first panelist, and then we'll do a little bit of an icebreaker, and then we'll introduce our next panelist after that. So our first panelist is Mayor Satya Rhodes-Conway. She is the 58th mayor of Madison, Wisconsin. Her administration is focused on affordable housing, rapid transit, climate change, and racial equity. She has extensive experience in local policy and practice, having worked with mayors across the country for over a decade and having served 3 terms on the Madison Common Council. Thank you so much for being here, Mayor. A first question for you, just a simple one. What most excites you about the work that you're doing on lead abatement and energy improvements in multifamily housing?
Thank you, Julia, and thanks everybody for joining us today. It's great to be in this space and to be able to talk about this really good work. So I don't know that I can pick one thing that is the most exciting. I think there's a lot of aspects that are really exciting that we can get into, but let me just mention 2. And so one is, that ultimately we are improving people's living environments, right? That we are making people's lives better through their built environment. And that's the whole point of all of this, right? And so that's really exciting and powerful. The other thing that I think is really interesting from a more of a sort of city policy geek point of view is the opportunity to weave together sort of multiple efforts and goals into one program. And, I've been thinking for years probably, since when I was at the Mayor's Innovation Project and before I was elected, about how we sort of lessen the burden on households in getting them help, lessen the burden potentially on landlords, and also potentially on cities by, instead of, here we come on energy efficiency, and here we come on lead, and here we come on mold, and here we come on solar, and these are all different interactions with different people, we could just show up once and say, let's do all the things. And that's easier for us and easier for you. And that's really exciting to me, to be able to start to actually put that into practice and to test it and to see how far we can stretch the boundaries of that. Again, all in service of making people's lives better.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And I hope we'll get to dig into some of those issues about how you're combining those services together a little bit later in the conversation. For now, let me switch over to introducing Abigail Corso. Abigail is currently the Chief Strategy Officer at Elevate, located in Chicago, Illinois. In this role, she oversees Elevate's strategy in developing new programs nationwide, from energy efficiency, solar, and planning, including building up their dynamic pricing and flagship multifamily building retrofit programs. Hi, Abigail. How are you today?
I'm fine, and thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel.
Oh, great. We're so grateful to have you today. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the mayor. What most excites you about the work that you're doing on lead abatement and energy improvements?
Well, I just wanted to clarify, most of our Elevate staff is in Chicago, but I am based in Madison, Wisconsin. We have a small team here that is doing fantastic work. And I see one of our partners, Sustain Dane, is on the call today. And I just do want to give a shout out to Sustain Dane. They have been a full and great partner in all the work we're doing around energy efficiency and now lead and mold abatement. And I want to reiterate the mayor's comment that, making buildings more comfortable and healthier for residents is most important to us. And having done this work for over 20 years, being able to work with an owner to kind of touch their building in many ways and making it easier for that owner is, I think, what kind of keeps us going and makes us want to do more of this work, because I think we can get more done if we're really working closely with owners and residents and not having to have, those owners actually try and figure things out for themselves.
Great. Thank you so much. And we're going to get here to our third panelist, our last but definitely not least, representative from the West Coast, Ryan Ramos. Ryan is the Senior Energy Specialist with the San Francisco Environment Department. In his role, he manages energy efficiency and electrification programming focused on multifamily and small commercial buildings, as well as San Francisco's fixed lead SF program. Thanks for being here, Ryan. What about you? What most excites you about the work that you're doing on combining lead abatement and energy efficiency programs?
Sure. Thanks, Julia, for the opportunity to be on this panel. The thing that excites me the most is being able to address this serious health concern that we have in San Francisco. As you know, we have a very old housing stock here, and we have communities that have been oftentimes left behind in the kind of the economic growth that has happened in San Francisco. And so our program is dedicated to focusing on improving the health outcomes in these communities, and being able to layer or braid in energy efficiency and electrification, I think, is another opportunity to improve health, safety, and comfort in these homes, and in particular in communities that oftentimes are capital constrained. Being able to lift these folks up and provide them, their residents, an ability to just improve their livelihoods and their homes. So looking forward to being able to make the change. That we don't quite have the funding to do everyone in every building, but we're going to try to get to as many as we can.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ryan. So as we launch into our conversation here, I'd love to start by asking the mayor to help kick us off. You've gotten into some of this a little bit already, but maybe we can talk about it a little more. The program that you launched in Madison seeks to identify and improve multiple aspects of housing quality at one time in multifamily homes. In this case, both energy efficiency and renewable energy type concerns, as well as lead abatement, with the health focus on these homes that your residents live in. Can you tell us why you think that those kind of programs that start to push these multiple issues together are important? They aren't necessarily typical in city governments. And so it did take some special consideration on your part to start something like this. Can you talk about why it's important for your city?
Yeah, absolutely. So the area that we're working in Madison is the north side of Madison, and it's the area that I used to represent when I was on the city council. So I'm a little more familiar with the building stock and the community, which allowed me, I think, to think about it in a slightly different way, and to recognize that we have a significant amount of what we describe as naturally occurring affordable housing, right? So this is multifamily buildings that are affordable mostly by virtue of their age, not by virtue of being subsidized affordable housing. And this is important housing stock in Madison because housing is, okay, maybe not San Francisco level crazy, but crazy expensive. And we're not producing affordable housing at the rate that we need to be. So hanging on to the affordable housing we have is really important. But it's also important that in the case of this naturally occurring affordable housing, that we don't just say, oh, well, it's affordable, and so we don't want to touch it, because if we touch it, it's like the rent's going to go up, right? And so sort of cracking that nut of how do we acknowledge that we need the affordability component, but we also need the apartments to be healthy and safe and efficient. That was one of the motivations for me, is like really looking at that dilemma. And then once we're into the question of, okay, we're going to try and improve the energy efficiency of these buildings, and we're going to try and bring renewable energy to these buildings, then you just sort of recognize what else is going on here, right? Like what else is happening in these buildings. And again, because I sort of know the neighborhood a little bit better, I know that by virtue of the age of building, some of them are going to have lead issues, lead paint issues, or other issues. And by virtue of where they are in the city, I know that some of them are going to have like basement flooding issues, which leads to mold. And so it's more of looking at it from the point of view of the neighborhood, of the resident, of the building, like just what's going on here, what do these buildings need, and recognizing that we have the potential, once we're in that conversation with the landlord, which I'm sure we'll touch on this later, like that's a hard conversation to get into just to begin with, but once we're there, because it's so hard to get the landlords to be interested, man, we really want to do as many things as possible, right? Like we don't want to waste that opportunity. And so what we started out and where we're at right now really is just the energy efficiency piece. But what the grant that we got from Healthy Babies, Bright Futures allowed us to do was to really look at how could we braid in doing lead and mold and other things while we're there in the conversation with the landlord and helping them to improve their property. So it really sort of comes out of that desire to see the whole building and to recognize the whole resident experience. And why not do something crazy? Because just because nobody's ever done it before doesn't mean that we couldn't get it done.
That's a good attitude to have, I think. So let's get into some of the details about how this program works. Abigail's been working with you, and I think it'd be helpful for the audience if we could hear some details, just a brief overview. How does the program work? How's it funded? And you know, what's, aside from what we've already kind of pointed out, is there anything really different about this program than the way you would typically approach, or a city would typically approach a program like this? Abigail, can you chime in on that?
Sure. And we took the approach with this program. We started with efficiency and wanting to make these buildings more efficient through insulation and weatherization. And these buildings are not necessarily eligible for the weatherization program. So for a variety of reasons, mainly income eligibility. So they are kind of the missing middle in a lot of the efficiency programs here, where the subsidized stock, you know, it's easy to identify and does get attention. The very low income gets attention because it's eligible for weatherization. So in this missing middle, we decided, you know, we really needed to address this as well, because as the mayor said, it's a very important part of our affordable building stock here in Madison and Dane County. In fact, it is the affordable stock where many lower income and workforce people live. So we started with efficiency. We started working on the north side, working with individual building owners to bring their buildings through the program. And how we have it structured is our partner, Sustain Dane, does the intake, and they work directly with the building owner as a navigator. So they really help the building owner get an energy assessment, which Elevate provides. They help the owner, you know, identify contractors, and then we work with the contractors and the owners to get the upgrades completed. Kind of as we started working through buildings, there are opportunities for electrification, as Ryan mentioned. So we're starting to see those and kind of work within that capacity. There's lots of opportunities for solar here, and we have great incentives around solar in Madison. And the missing piece was, well, how are we addressing some of these other health and safety issues? And lead and mold were kind of on the radar of the city. They are an issue in these buildings. So we did spend a fair amount of time, you know, doing some mapping and kind of really understanding what is the lead and mold process, you know, through the Department of Health, and how are buildings identified, and then how do we work within that process to integrate that into the efficiency program. And that's where we are now. We've completed all of that process work, all of the work with the Department of Health. And now we are ready to go into buildings and really start to do a comprehensive assessment. So looking at both efficiency, electrification, solar, and lead and mold issues. And then use our kind of one-stop shop Navigator program to bring the building owner kind of through each of those pathways, depending on the needs of the buildings and the residents. So I'll stop there.
Great, that was really helpful. Thank you. So for Ryan, it's the same question for you. If you could give us an overview of your program, how it works and how it's funded. I know there are some things that are very similar to Madison, but there are some really unique things about the program that you're running, and I think we'd love to hear about what those are.
Right. So in San Francisco, we're sort of coming at this issue from the other side, with approaching it with the lead side, because our funding for the fixed lead SF program is from a legal settlement from paint companies. And so the city and county of San Francisco are party to this lawsuit, along with 9 other jurisdictions in California. And so when the opportunity came up for the city to take these funds and implement them to reduce lead hazards in homes, the Environment Department was tapped primarily because we have experience running programs that reach homeowners, that reach tenants. And so we were brought in to cover that aspect. And the health department is the department that's really minding more of the health-related issues, the targeting of where we do our outreach, which neighborhoods that we focus on. And so the unique part of our program is, with our experience in energy efficiency, we're bringing in a third-party administrator to kind of ease the payments, which with our city rules made it very tricky to actually navigate. And also with our energy efficiency experience, bringing in the experts in doing the lead inspections and bringing in the experts to do the actual remediation work. So I think from a property owner's perspective, we're easing the burden of addressing these major health issues. But the other important piece I wanted to bring up was one of the measures that we're really going after are windows. As you know, windows are a very costly improvement and has multiple benefits. And once we identify a lead paint containing window, we can also upgrade that to a more energy efficient window, double pane, reduce the draftiness. So those are, essentially killing two birds with one stone there. And once we're in the unit, we're already looking at windows as a lead measure and an energy efficiency measure. It's a pretty small step to start evaluating other opportunities on the site. And the staff that has been assigned to this program have dozens of years of experience doing energy efficiency assessments. And so it's essentially a natural kind of add-on, since we're already on the property. And as the mayor stated, if we can pitch as many opportunities to provide services that will improve outcomes for the residents, I'm all for that. And our leaders of our department, to credit them, also viewed this as an opportunity to provide more services to the residents. And so we are planning on identifying opportunities, whether it's from lighting, the HVAC, domestic hot water, and then pairing these opportunities with the existing programs that serve the residents, whether it's through our local utility or our municipal utility. So we have a number of different channels from which they can obtain funding to help with the energy efficiency side of the project.
Great. I'm going to sneak in just a little follow-on question from our audience here for you, Ryan. I think that you've explained how you have these pre-existing experts on energy efficiency who have, have long worked in this field and know exactly how to approach those type of projects. But when you're starting to have those same folks weaving in issues around improving indoor health, how do you train them up for that? But also, are there standards, particularly the audience like to know about mold remediation, and whether there's a standard that you needed to teach your staff and your contractors to know and to work to, or how you've approached that issue?
So we've had the fortune that the staff that we have assigned has experience as a carpenter. So he's done work for almost 20 years in carpentry. So that gives him an insight on home construction. And clearly that is not enough kind of certification to work on lead. So we placed him in a California state program, a public health program, for him to get the certification to be what's called a project monitor, allowing him to identify measures and lead hazards and create a scope of work for that. So we certainly have worked to train the staff on this, and the Department of Public Health has worked on lead issues for decades at this point. So they also have staff that are experienced in handling these health-related issues. And so we certainly rely heavily on our health department, as they are, co-equal partners with us on the Fixed Lead SF program. And we are working to cross-train staff within both departments to be able to understand energy and lead issues. Mold, we're not specifically looking at mold in this program. We are looking to potentially expand and identify other indoor air quality. And so mold would clearly be one of those. We haven't really figured out a way to incorporate that just yet, but it's certainly on our radar for being able to kind of deliver comprehensive services. So mold is certainly an item that we have on our agenda to address in some manner.
Great. Let's put a pin in a conversation about standards and training, and we can come back to that at the end of the conversation during Q&A. I want to make sure we're staying on track here with our questions. So the next question I had for the group here is related to the early implementation of your programs. So how did you get them started? Was there something in particular that caused you to shift from running a single issue program to a multi-issue program? And if you were yourself the person who had this idea and launched it, we'd love to hear about that. And also if you were there during the time when this was getting off the ground, any challenges that you faced during that time helps the audience understand how they might replicate some of these types of programs in their areas as well. Let me kick the question over to Mayor Rhodes-Conway first and hear about the program in Madison.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think I'm hearing some interesting similarities already, right? So we started again with the energy efficiency and weatherization, thanks to some grant dollars and the partnership with Elevate and Sustain Dane. And Abby can share some more details on that. But one of the great things about being mayor is that I get to have good ideas and other people go implement them. So I really appreciate Abby being one of those implementers. But yeah, so it started because we were focused on efficiency and we had some grant money to implement that. And then, we have, and Abby sort of referenced this, we have existing programs that are funded by the city that support the assessment for an installation of solar on affordable housing. And so that's a sort of obvious overlap. You've got an existing program. You just have to sort of say, here, come right up against this other program. And it also was similar staff involved on our side. So that's sort of an obvious add-on. And then it was the advent of the Healthy Babies, Bright Futures grant program that made me think, oh, wait, maybe we could, it's not enough money to implement, but it's enough money for us to figure out if we could implement this. And so I give a lot of credit to Healthy Babies, Bright Futures and to the Mayor's Innovation Project for making that available, because it really was the thing that both sparked my thinking around it and also made it possible for us to do the development work. And as Abby said, the sort of mapping work to figure out how would we do this layering and could it work and what expertise do we need and what training might be needed. And I don't know that we would have had the staff time or the bandwidth to do that otherwise. So that was really important for us. And then, and we're looking forward, and again, Abby can share more details on this, but we're looking forward to different sources of funding, that might be more flexible or that we might be able to layer on top of each other to accomplish all of these things in buildings going forward.
Okay. Ryan, I think we'll probably hear from you that funding was a big instigator and a motivator in your early implementation, but tell us about that. Tell us about any challenges you faced during the early stages of implementing your program.
Sure. Of course, the settlement money was really the catalyst for getting us to begin this program. And as far as our early implementation, we've started at what we've considered a pilot portion of our program where we're enrolling certain segments of the population. And right now we're focusing on existing Department of Public Health led cases. So we're going after homes that have existing elevated blood lead levels and are being issued notices of violation, and they are compelled to address these lead hazards. And through the notice of violation process, we are also presenting them our program, presenting them the benefits of the program, basically automatic enrollment to address these issues. So that is how we're starting, giving us an opportunity to address kind of existing health concerns and bringing them into the fold. One of the challenges that we've found recently is the availability of lead inspectors, certified lead inspectors to do the work. And we were hoping to have kind of a robust group of contractors that we can bring into the fold, at least add some competitive pressure to keep prices down. And some of the invoices we've received have been a little bit stunning, I would have to say, if I'm perfectly honest about it. And so we are, I think the other challenge kind of following on that is we have 3 other counties adjacent to ours that are also going to be running programs and using inspectors and contractors and potentially adding additional strain on the availability. And so the workforce development aspect of our program is something that we're hoping to initiate additional entrance into the inspector realm, hopefully to kind of reduce the pressure, because ultimately we want to serve as many residents as possible. And with costs exceeding what we had initially anticipated, we may not be able to get to the number, our unit goals that we have. So that's certainly a concern. We have, our program is scheduled to last at least 5 years. And so we have time to make adjustments, but it's a little, I don't want to say I'm discouraged, but it's certainly a challenge, and it's something that we need to find a solution for.
So we're going to come back to the topic of supply of contractors and workforce development intersections here in a little bit. But for now, I want to ask about the demand side from customers. So we know that notoriously it can be really difficult to get landlords and single family homeowners involved in programs like these. In your communities in Madison and in San Francisco, did you confront those same problems? And if you did, what kind of strategies did you use to engage your building owners and property managers in your city? And do you have any tips for the audience about how they might do the same in their cities? Ryan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So we've done outreach to a number of different stakeholder groups and have run a couple of kind of information gathering sessions. So we've worked with our Small Property Owners Association to kind of get some feedback and understand where there may be some kind of gaps in awareness with their membership. And so we've worked hard to reach out to these organizations. And so presently we don't quite have a pipeline built up because we haven't officially launched the main part of our program. So our demand generation, if you want to call it that, has been coming from our health department's notice of violation. So that's been a pretty steady piece, but we're looking, of course, to scale this to a rate that's going to be far exceed what the notice of the NOVs are going to produce. And so on the property management side, we are doing what we can to uncover opportunities, working with the community-based organizations, which are oftentimes the most trusted organizations in the communities we're focusing on, letting them know about it, working with our existing health clinics to make sure that they understand there is a mechanism in order to address lead hazards. So we are certainly putting our efforts together on this, and we feel like we have a pretty good start. So I don't think we are, it remains to be seen once we've officially launched the program. But I think we're fairly confident that we're not going to have any issues filling up our queue.
Fantastic. Abigail, I'm going to turn that same question over to you about challenges with getting folks enrolled in your program. But as I do that, I want to weave in a question from the audience about whether there are any legislative initiatives in Madison or other kind of external sticks or carrots that are helping funnel folks to your program, or if it's fully voluntary.
So right now it is fully voluntary. Yes, project origination is hard. I don't want to underestimate that, especially with the types of buildings owners that we are engaged with, which is the naturally occurring affordable stock, because there's typically not a whole lot of publicly available lists. It's hard to find the buildings. And so it was slow going to start. We also worked with a community-based organization. We worked with the alders on the north side to really start identifying landlords and buildings that would meet the eligibility for the program. And frankly, the building owners self-selected our early owners, and they worked with us, and they received a grant, which helped to make the program more attractive. They received free technical assistance. So that's the energy assessment, helping identify contractors, helping with, construction management, which is also a huge benefit to owners who are really busy, and maybe their building portfolio is a second job for them. It's an investment property. And I will say that once we really started getting owners in, those early owners that self-selected, there's been a lot of word of mouth amongst the ownership. So we've really increased the number of units that are coming through the program now, and I do attribute that to word of mouth. But we also we do spend time talking to property managers. We do spend time with the apartment association. We spend time with community-based organizations. So we do talk about the program a lot. It's on our websites, respective websites. And I think the word does get around that there is some grant money available for building upgrades. That's the early carrot, the first carrot, and then there's lots of other incentives that we braid together kind of on the back end once the owner is in the program.
That's really helpful. Thank you. We've just talked about how we go about getting landlords and building owners and property managers involved in these programs that we're running in Madison and San Francisco. But one of the things that both of your cities are also needing to do is to make sure that the money that you're spending and the attention and services that you're providing make it to the most vulnerable people in your cities. So in the case of lead hazards, that would be primarily children. And in general, on both the energy front and, of course, the lead front, there's a strong need and an imperative to make sure that the services are making it to the communities who have been most impacted by structural injustice. Can you talk about what methods that you have used in your program to direct the funds, either data indicators or special outreach strategies that you might have used to get that service to where it needs to go? And Abigail, why don't we just start with you, since you were in the middle of talking about your program?
Yeah, so we've done several types of mapping. So we've mapped by census block. So we really understand which blocks, are predominantly, comprised of residents that are at 80% area median income or less. So, we've mapped the whole county. And that was one of the reasons we also decided to focus on the north side of Madison, because it was definitely an area that we recognized as meeting that kind of income criteria. But then, as part of the Healthy Babies Bright Future grant, we did an additional layer of mapping, and we mapped not only income eligibility, we mapped lead we used lead data, and so we mapped potential lead hotspots in the city. We mapped housing age, because the correlation of lead in housing is very much based on the age of the building. And then we also did flood mapping. So we had access to mapping that the city completed because we had a lot of flooding in 2018 here. And so we created kind of a portfolio of maps that looked at each of these issues, and it enabled us to now, do some more specific targeting in areas where there might be a lot of there will be a lot of overlap based on housing age, income, residential income, and then where lead and mold, potential hotspots could be. So moving forward, we'll be using that kind of additional mapping to help do further targeting. But it really comes down to ultimately getting into the buildings and really seeing what's what we have in front of us, for sure.
And Ryan, in San Francisco, you've talked about how you're getting a lot of your participants being referred to you because of findings with elevated lead blood levels from children. Is that the full story behind how folks come to you, or is there more about how you guys are strategizing to get out there to the communities that you need to reach?
Yeah, there's certainly more to it than that. We are our program does require an eligible residence to have children, or a child or children. So we certainly screen for that that criteria. But we also we've been looking at data that the Department of Public Health has collected over the last few decades to look at which neighborhoods, which census tracts have the highest incidence of childhood elevated lead level. And we've kind of crossed that with the income levels of certain communities, and then also other health indices. And so we've, based on kind of those findings and the data that the health department has collected, we've selected 3 zip codes that we're going to focus our program on during the first kind of phase. We certainly are open to expanding our reach, but at this stage, we want to kind of focus on those areas that we have the data to show the highest incidence of blood lead level, the highest incidence of of just impact on children. So we're going to be reaching out using our trusted partners in CBOs, working with the health clinics in those areas, and making sure that they're aware of our program. So we certainly have an equity screen that we want to highlight here, and are doing our best to identify those that are really most impacted and also most in need.
All right, let's move to the next question. I want to keep us on time and make sure we have time for Q&A. Mayor Rhodes-Conway, you spoke eloquently in the beginning about how impactful and life-changing these programs can be for the folks who live in these buildings that you're retrofitting. Aside from that direct impact to the families, what other benefits or potential benefits that might arise from this program that you're running in Madison? And one example that sort of springs to mind is the possibility for workforce development. Is that a component of the program? Are there other things around your program that you think really should be called out as a benefit to the community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so anytime that you're doing energy efficiency, right, there are ripples of benefits that come out from there, and certainly with solar as well. So you are saving the family's money, you're saving the building owner money, you're improving the property, you're improving the health of the folks living there, but you're also reducing emissions from our local utilities, and so you're improving local air quality, you're reducing the impacts of climate change in the long run. So there's a lot of community-wide benefits that are achieved by this work. And then there's sort of broader community health benefits as well, as we layer on the lead and mold work, stemming from the prevention of harm or the improvement of health of the families living in the buildings, and then the lack of impact or conversely the benefit to the community by those harms not happening. So I think there's a lot there that is really beneficial to the community. And then, yes, of course, somebody's got to do this work, right? And so there's a sort of employment benefit, there's a workforce benefit, and there's all of the multipliers of us spending the money in the community with local contractors that then go out and, spend money in the community. And so there's definitely that sort of recycling impact on our economy. And there's, in terms of the workforce, there's a decent ecosystem here in Madison of training folks up into the construction workforce, if that's the direction that they want to go. So there definitely are opportunities for folks who want to take advantage of doing this kind of work as we generate more demand. Right, there's an opportunity for people to move into to those jobs and those careers, via some of the training programs that the city funds or that exist here in Madison.
And Ryan, in San Francisco, obviously you've talked about the incredibly surging price of construction right now, and the demand for construction workers, especially trained ones, on issues such as you're talking about with lead hazard abatement and energy efficiency. Can you talk about that a little bit more? If your program and your city have been doing anything to kind of train up the workforce, get more folks who are who already have those skills attracted to coming your direction? I know housing costs in San Francisco are really high, which makes it difficult to bring in blue collar workers, but talk about that a little bit. And also if there are any other benefits that you want to really highlight about your program.
Yeah, I think with the workforce development aspect of our program, it is something that is integral to our approach. One of the partners in Fixed Lead SF program is the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. And so we are working closely with them to kind of first map out what is likely workforce that's going to fill these roles. I think in a lot of workforce development programs, they're looking to train up specific trades, and within lead remediation, it's kind of a little bit different. So I think we're still in the midst of developing a curriculum that is different from what our workforce development office has typically been doing. We have a program called City Build, but it's generally like an apprentice program. It generates plumbers, it generates carpenters, but in very specific kind of lanes. And what we've kind of discovered with inspections and lead remediation, there tends to be a number of skills that aren't necessarily contained only in a single lane, and a large amount of the workforce that is going to be working on especially the lead remediation part are not going to be union specifically contractors. So we do have kind of a little bit of tension between how our workforce development office generally trains the workforce and how we're viewing, or what we viewed as, the general workforce in lead remediation. So it's yet to be determined how we're going to bridge that gap, but it's certainly an issue that we are well aware of and are working hard to address.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. I have one last question for the group, and this is an important one, but we have to keep it very brief so we have enough time for Q&A from the audience. So in a very short snippet from each of you, your favorite piece of advice that you would give to our audience members about how they could start something like this in their cities, or be successful with something like this in their cities. Abigail, I'm going to start with you because you've been offline for a little bit and we'd love to hear from you.
These are going to seem a little bit at odds, but having good data, really understanding the data and what your housing stock is and needs. But I think also having a vision and really working with community-based organizations as partners. I mean, I cannot overestimate, overstate how important that is, for the success of these programs.
Great. And Ryan, how about you in San Francisco?
I would say fostering collaborative opportunities within, both within the city and outside of the city, with both your other city departments and CBOs and other organizations that are kind of aligned with your values and what you're trying to achieve. And I think we've, the Fix Let SF program specifically is that we're a partnership amongst 4 different city entities. We're working with the other cities and counties that are also party to this flood settlement, sharing learnings and resources. So I think being able to leverage the institutional knowledge that exists within other organizations in cities and outside the organizations, private sector is really crucial to achieving success.
Okay, and Mayor, we're going to let you get the last word on this.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would just say ditto to what Abigail and Ryan said, and then just don't be. I mean, be creative. Don't be afraid to try things. There's so many places. There's so many steps along the way that could be barriers. I think it's helpful to learn, obviously, from not just from the programs that we're talking about, but from other programs out there that do similar work, right? So I think it's instructive to learn from the weatherization program, and the barriers that it faces and has overcome or not, right? I think it's instructive to learn from any solar installation programs that are in your play. I mean, just like think about who else is doing something similar, even if it's not directly on mold or directly on lead or directly on energy, right? And learn from that, and be creative. Because I think every place can do a version of this. It's going to look a little different everywhere. But I think that there are ways to do this layering pretty much everywhere, wherever you are.
Thank you so much to the panelists. I'm going to pass back to Katya, who's going to handle going over our audience questions. So don't disappear. We do have a little bit more from the audience to talk about.
Hey, everyone, and please join me in thanking our panelists and our moderator today. I really appreciate all of your time. I want to get to a couple last questions here that I don't think we addressed in the Q&A. I'll ask Ryan and Abigail first. If you have any perspective on this, was there any legislative initiatives to force or encourage compliance?
Not directly. Our program is voluntary. We're definitely taking a carrot approach, but on the lead side, there is a compliance pathway for lead when there is a child with a high in the household. So we are actually working with, within a voluntary program, kind of balancing that, some buildings may end up in a compliance pathway. So we're still need to balance that. And, as we kind of start this joint program up, we'll be kind of navigating that. Department of Health has been amazing. So we'll be, working closely with them for sure.
Vein in San Francisco, the kind of compulsion or the enforcement mechanism is really through our health department, and it only occurs if there is a identified elevated blood lead level. Other than that, we are also a voluntary program. Any of the participants in our pilot that have received NOVs are welcome to find a different pathway to correct their lead hazards, but our program offers essentially a free service for them. So it would be kind of foolish to say no to that. But yeah, we are also voluntary. program.
Thank you both. And one other I'm seeing in here, are there evaluative or quantitative metrics or resources for those things that you have found helpful in quantifying the health benefits and helping to make the case for programs like this?
That's a great question. You know, we quantify the energy benefits, you know, and we actually quantify carbon benefits. It is modeled for sure. I think on the health side, whenever we go into a building, and this is kind of even kind of pre-lead and mold process development, we always look at indoor air quality through various testing. So we do have an indication from the energy side, you know, where the needs are, and we can quantify that, you know, as part of our assessment process. And we're it's very important to us that, you know, the indoor air quality, that there's good indoor air quality in the building. So actually we have spent some time correcting that, you know, outside of this program. And so that is, you know, quantifiable, although modeled at the front end of the program, for sure. And we know how many buildings that need that have come through the program.
Thank you, Abigail. Okay. Seeing the time, I want to respect everyone's time and thank again, Julia, thank you for moderating, and many thanks to Mayor Rhodes-Conway, Abigail Corso, Ryan Ramos for their good work with us today and sharing it with us today. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to Kyra. We'll be happy to work with you to connect you to the right people and resources to answer them. And if you're interested in digging deeper into the workforce development component of this, please register for next month's webinar. We'll pop that link in to the chat one more time. And thank you. Have a wonderful day. Remember to vote next Tuesday, the 8th. Thank you all.